The question is, as on the order paper, can I call Minister Trott?
Mr. Speaker, it is a privilege to open the final day of budget debates in this House. A budget with a plan to grow the economy, for better public services and to make work pay. Today's debate is focused on a theme close to my heart, improving productivity. As some of you know, back in 2010, before I became a Member of Parliament, I worked for my noble friend Lord Maud on an efficiency and reform agenda that saved the government £14 billion a year by 2014 and captured everything from buying printer paper collectively to better managing government projects and digitising services. This agenda not only cut costs, it improved productivity. Ahead of the pandemic, and under this government, productivity in the private sector increased by 0.7% a year on average between 2010 and 2019. This is in stark contrast, I'm sure the opposite benches will be interested to know, that between 1997 and 2009, where public sector productivity declined between 0.2% on average per annum. Our success was entirely due to hard work behind the scenes and relentlessly focusing on outputs. We must never fall into the trap of thinking... yes, I could wait to the honourable gentleman.
I thank her for giving way, but rather than cherry-pick statistics, what do you say about the fact that House of Commons Library has confirmed that the UK currently has the lowest investment in G7, and also it's the second worst performer post-pandemic in the G7 in terms of economic growth?
Good point.
I would say to the honourable gentleman that since 2010 we have grown faster than France, Germany and Italy, and we're predicted to do the same in the next 5 years. But it is no coincidence that between 2010 and 2019, violent crime and burglaries halved. Our reading standards in schools, which were previously behind France, Germany and Sweden, raced ahead. Latest technologies such as the NHS app and virtual wards are now used by patients across the country. But this is not a once-and-done situation. The effect of the pandemic on productivity was significant. Moreover, as Lord Maud puts it, the focus on productivity must never end. It will always be a work in progress. There can never be a steady state. The public for whom public services exist deserve nothing less. And that is why this Conservative Chancellor is willing to invest once again to drive change. The head of the National Audit Office has said that if we can improve public sector productivity, the size of the prize is tens of billions of pounds. And the OBR estimate that raising public sector productivity by 5% would be the equivalent of around £20 billion extra in funding. Yeah, I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the Chief Secretary for giving way. While she's on the subject of the OBR, can the Chief Secretary confirm whether the OBR are correct that the target public sector debt measure is forecast to increase, or do her own personal calculations continue to suggest that debt will fall?
The honourable gentleman, I'm sure, will see in the OBR figures that public sector net debt overall is subject to fall, and public sector net debt, excluding Bank of England, is due to fall in the fourth and fifth year of the forecast. Well, no, it's just the overall public sector net debt figure. This will help manage the size of the state in the long term, while also maintaining public service quality and delivering savings for taxpayers. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
To that last answer, why has the government chosen a debt measure that excludes the Bank of England?
Put simply, is because we're more in control of that figure. So the overall figure is falling, but public sector net debt excludes the impact of the Bank of England on the figures. This will help manage the size of the state in the long term, while also maintaining public service quality and delivering savings for taxpayers. And this is why, 14 years on, in my role as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, I'm delighted to be leading our public sector productivity programme. I would, of course, give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm pleased the Minister is in charge of this programme, so perhaps she can explain a little bit more about it. Local government's got currently a deficit of around £4 billion. In the productivity plan for local government, the government has highlighted the need to reduce waste on equalities, diversity and inclusion. I can't find any figure from the government about how much that's going to save. The Taxpayers Alliance says it's going to save 50 million over 3 years towards the £4 billion deficit. Has she got a figure that suggests the saving on that part of the productivity plan is going to be greater?
Yes, the savings from the productivity plan will be billions of pounds. But a word first on the economic context, Mr. Speaker. The last few years have not been easy. The pandemic, Putin's illegal occupation of Ukraine, energy price rises, and now conflict in the Middle East have taken their toll on the economy, on businesses, and on families. But because of the difficult decision that this government have taken, the economy is turning a corner. Inflation has more than halved, from 11 to 4%. Real wages are up now for 7 months in a row. Unemployment is down from the highs of 8% in 2010 to 3.9% at the end of last year. And because we have stuck to our plan, we have been able to cut the double tax on work, putting £900 back into working people's pockets. The Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies gave their verdict on our tax cuts for workers on Sunday, which was genuinely putting a lot more money back in the pockets of people. I will give way to the Honourable Lady.
Thank you very much. I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way, but if she's referring to the National Insurance cut by 2%, the cut has been wiped out by the freeze in income tax thresholds, and the average worker on £35,000 a year will still be almost £400 a year worse off this year over last year. So how do these figures match up?
I'm sure the Honourable Lady will be pleased to know that the average earner will have the lowest effective tax rate since 1975. Yeah. But sadly, the Labour Party are putting this in jeopardy. I'm going to make a bit of progress. The party opposite has no plan to cut taxes and can't name a single one that they would cut. Instead, they are trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes by pretending they've refinanced their £28 billion a year plan to decarbonise. They themselves have said their pledge costs £28 billion a year, and they are not apparently scaling their promises back. So, Mr. Speaker, we all know what this means: more taxes for hard-working families. Well, what the public and this House needs to know, Madam Deputy Speaker, is this: which tax will they raise to pay for the plan? And will they, if in government after the general election, stick to our spending plan set out in the budget? The British public deserve to know. Now, in this Parliament, the total departmental spending has increased by 3.2% per year in real terms, and day-to-day departmental spending will grow at 1% a year on average in real terms beyond the current spending review period. The government is protecting the record increase in capital spending over this Parliament, which will deliver around £600 billion of public sector investment over the next 5 years. And, as announced in the budget, we're committing an additional £2.5 billion funding for the NHS in England in 24-25, protecting day-to-day funding in real terms. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
To her for giving way. Will she be aware of the fact there are thousands of people in this country who would love to work and would love to be productive, and they can't because they are living with cancer? Cancer obviously is a threat to people's life. It also limits their ability to earn a living. She's aware, I'm sure, that a third of people diagnosed with cancer wait 2 months before their first intervention to help cure them. Is there any room within her capital spending that she set out for a large-scale investment in radiotherapy in this country, as set out by the All-Party Group on Radiotherapy, which would help to cure people more quickly and do so more targetedly so there was not collateral damage and people go back to work much sooner?
Good call.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and I praise him for his work that he has done on this very important issue. And I know that the capital money that we're putting in will help with issues exactly like the ones he's highlighted. But I just want to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you can't just put more money into public services and hope for the best. I was delighted to read that the honourable member for Bristol North West said recently that he was in favour of reform and not splurging on public services. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, he's hoping for breaking the habit of the lifetime for the Labour Party. I genuinely hope that he will agree with some of the measures we've set out today on productivity, because outcomes are determined by how things are done, and focusing on outcomes, not funding, is where we can deliver real value for the taxpayer. It is a trap to think that simply spending more buys us better public services. Simply spending more is also not sustainable. Without action, public spending is forecast to grow more than... Sorry, I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank the Minister for giving way. On the subject of unfunded spending commitments, on the Treasury Select Committee this morning, we learned from the OBR that not only have they not been told by the government about the £46 billion ambition to scrap NI contributions altogether? But because they've not been told, they can't forecast the economic impact it may have. How does the Minister think that this will bake in long-term economic stability for the United Kingdom?
Unlike the Labour Party's massive £28 billion unfunded tax commitment by 2030, our long-term ambition to cut national insurance, to raise the double tax on work, doesn't have a date on it. We've also shown that what we can do over time is, by careful stewardship of the economy, we can reduce people's taxes without increasing taxes and without cutting spending. So, simply spending more is not sustainable. Without action, public spending is forecast to grow faster than GDP from 2030, accounting for pressures we cannot avoid, such as demographic changes. This must be managed with all the tools at our disposal, not by borrowing more or increasing taxes on the British public, but instead, we've got to assess how we deliver public services and improve them to make the UK more productive and ensure long-term sustainability of public finances. So yes, this is about money, but it's also about delivering the best services for the public, because productivity isn't a theoretical concept. It affects us all in each area of our everyday lives. I want to see better outcomes for children, for teachers who have more time to spend with pupils rather than filling out paperwork. I want the police to be able to spend more time on the beat, not on forms. And as a Member of Parliament representing my constituents of Sevenoaks and Swanley, I want nurses and doctors spending time with patients, not having to look at computer screens. Better public productivity means better value for money, better support for frontline workers to do their jobs effectively, and better results. At the budget last week, the Chancellor announced that we are allocating £4.2 billion to invest in productivity. This package is broad and comprehensive and includes £3.4 billion to the NHS, double the current budget for tech and digital transformation. The NHS say that it will unlock over £35 billion in the coming years, 10 times the amount that we will put in. At the next spending review, that will be the model for all of our public services. £105 million for 15 new special free schools across England, which I know will be welcome across the House, which create over 2,000 high-quality places for children with special educational needs and disabilities and prevent local authorities' use of costly independent provision. £165 million to tackle the shortage of children's home placements and rebuild the children's home estate, reducing the need for expensive and unsuitable emergency provision that does not produce the right outcomes for the children who need our help the most. £334 million to cut crime by improving policing technology, and £17 million for the modernisation of DWP's services, replacing the paper-based system for benefits. And as a former pensions minister, I know the impact that has had on the state pension. But this is just the start. I'm also committed to driving forward work to embed productivity at every level across the whole of the public sector. But to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, when I began thinking about this agenda in 2009, no one could have foreseen, I'll finish now, for the technological changes of the last decade. I've been very generous, come on. This change is revolutionising the private sector, and we now must embrace it in the public sector too. Mr. Speaker, our job is not yet done on the economy, but we're making progress on our plan to reward work and create growth, a plan that we put in jeopardy under the Labour Party. This budget does what it says on the tin, sticking to the plan, a plan that Britain needs, a plan that is putting money back in the pockets of British people, a plan that is working, and I commend this budget to the House.